stability in Iran is important for India. As regards President Trump's next move, I think it would be hazardous to even speculate about it. Iran, for us, is in our extended neighborhood. We have a major interest there. It's important for us to speak, but we don't need a megaphone to speak. We can do that quietly because sometimes quiet diplomacy works where megaphones don't. Power can compel, but legitimacy has to be earned. And the US, nobody thinks is a legitimate action. It's a action of a display of power.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Tracking Trump. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Well, this is a week that has seen a new US envoy to India finally take charge. He struck a much more conciliatory note when it comes to ties with India, but is there a genuine thaw or still a long way to go? More importantly, are we going to see the United States now make a move in Iran, where anti government protests have gripped the country for weeks? Unlike Venezuela, what happens in Iran has huge direct consequences for India and for Indians living in the Gulf. And joining us on the program today is Saeed Akbaruddin, India's former permanent representative to the United Nations, a seasoned diplomat who knows the region very, very well. Thank you, Ambassador Akbaruddin, for joining us on DeKoder today. I'd like to begin by asking you, do you think that Iran could possibly be on Trump's radar now? He initially didn't seem to indicate the US was going to do anything. Now he says help is on the way. And so is there a very real possibility that the US may do something there?
So first of all, thank you, Nidhi. It's always a pleasure to join you on your program. As regards President Trump's next move, I think it would be hazardous to even speculate about it because just a few days ago, we heard that US was drawing its perimeter, limiting itself largely to the Western Hemisphere. The Donroe Doctrine, which was a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, was supposed to be geographical in nature. But suddenly, we now see that there are various assertions being made about possibility of intervention in Iran. That intervention perhaps could be economic, and worse still, it could be kinetic also. So yes, that's the concern for all of us here because Iran, for us, is in our extended neighborhood. We have major interest there, and the implications will be much more consequential than any of the previous interventions that we have seen in the recent past.
Can I ask you to explain a little bit to our viewers about what India's strategic and economic interests are vis-a-vis Iran? I know that the government, since the last 24 hours, has been at pains to emphasize that trade with Iran, bilateral trade with Iran, is not what it used to be. It's been coming down steadily, and we'll come to that in just a moment. But I think more in terms of the strategic interests and why this matters for India.
So Iran and India have civilizational ties. We go back many centuries. But that said, today about 8 million Indians call the Gulf their home. That's a large diaspora. A large amount of our remittances come from there. Oil comes from there. A lot of our trade is channelized there. So for all these reasons, the Gulf is an important region for India, both economically in terms of people and also for our, if I may say, financial well-being. So for all these reasons, that's an important location. Iran is at the mouth of the Gulf. So anything there would disrupt the Indian diaspora in the Gulf. That's number one. Number two is Iran is also our entry point to Central Asia. We've invested a lot during the last several years in terms of the Chabahar port, also in terms of engagement with Afghanistan through Iran, because we have a serious roadblock in Pakistan on our western frontier. That's the second thing. A third thing is we also should not forget that Iran is a fount of Shiite Islam. And in India, there are a large number of Muslims who adhere to that sect of Islam. So, for several reasons, Iran is for us a important actor, and stability in Iran is important for India.
What do you make then of President Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on countries doing business with Iran? I mean, technically, that would include India as well, because whatever our trade may be at 1 point something billion at the moment, but as you pointed out, we have other interests like the Chabahar port. The fact is that technically, then we do attract that additional 25% tariff from the Trump administration. What do you make of this new threat?
So I would think that this would be extremely difficult to implement because while it may impinge on India, our trade with the US, we've weathered it in some manner. But look at who would be impacted by it. China has the largest amount of trade with the US. And already we've seen the US uh, not being able to impose large, high tariff rates with with China. So, number one would be China. Then there would be a lot of these Gulf states. For example, UAE. UAE is the entry point for a large amount of Western goods going to Iran. So that would be a second major country to be impacted. There would be Turkey, there would be Iraq. All of them have good ties with the US. So I would think that yes, if the US really pushes this, there could be an impact. But for us, it would be a limited impact. And trade, actually, Nidhi, always moves away. If there are barriers, trade finds other ways. So a billion plus of trade would not be very difficult for India to reroute through other places.
Given the larger implications, though, as you were explaining earlier, of any potential military action in Iran, on the region, and on India, do you think India needs to take a more proactive stand against any US intervention in Iran? And I ask this because India, like the EU and many other countries, reacted very cautiously to the invasion of Venezuela. And perhaps we don't have those kind of interests in Venezuela, but we do in Iran. So, is it important for India to speak up on this or still maintain a distance?
So, the Iran case is for us a different kettle of fish compared to Venezuela or even Ukraine or Gaza, even there, because here our interests are higher. That said, diplomacy can be done in various ways. Speaking up is one way of doing it, but now that there has been an engagement, we have a new ambassador who looks at South Asia as an envoy in its in a holistic way. He could be a challenge to indicate what would be the implications for South Asia as a whole, but for India, if there were military action in that region. Number two, there are other channels that our external affairs minister is in regular touch with the US Secretary of State. So I would think it's important for us to speak, but we don't need a megaphone to speak. We can do that quietly because sometimes quiet diplomacy works where megaphones don't.
And is that how you would respond to those analysts and others who've been very critical of India's relative silence on Venezuela? I think the criticism was that when we emphasize on an international rules based order, given our neighborhood, our border with China, etc., that India should have spoken up on principle, even on Venezuela. Would you say that it's still important to be quiet, or is there a point that comes where you say enough is enough and you stand up to a bully like Trump and call him out?
So, Nidhi, if we look at how the world has reacted to Venezuela, I think you could divide it into three groups. One were those who spoke of norms first. There were countries there who would always support norms, but there were also countries who violated norms egregiously, yet were speaking in terms of norms. Look at, for example, China. It has been the most vociferous in terms of denouncing the US intervention there. Yet, what did it do in the South China Sea? What does it do in many other parts of its neighborhood? So, let's be very clear. This norms first group is very diverse. India is not in that norms first group. I would say that India is between the norms first group and those who were supporting US exceptionalism. Now, those who were supporting US exceptionalism were Argentina, those countries who were very supportive of the US, Panama, Argentina, the forthcoming government in Chile, etc. They were saying that this is exceptional, this is US exceptionalism in display, etc. And they were supportive of that for their own reasons. And there's a third group, which broadly were the countries, mostly, I would say, a majority of those countries. They were what I would call the norms hedged group. They were supportive of norms. For example, India said they were deeply concerned. Now, you don't say you're deeply concerned unless you think that that act was not satisfactory. So they were deep. So we were concerned about the violation of norms, but we were hedging. So it's normed hedged group. And I would say many countries in Europe, many countries in Asia, including the whole of the Gulf, including the whole of South Asia. So those countries which were had serious interest with the US but were dismayed or disconcerted with the US action fitted into that. So I wouldn't say that India was totally silent. Sure, it didn't meet the norms first group reaction, but norms first in international relations is only a facade. Most countries always use that to promote their interests, as we saw in the case of the Chinese, or I could
But
name other countries who were using this as a facade.
certainly, but the bigger question then is, when such a large group of countries, and the EU in particular, the UK, India, when in a sense we sort of don't react that strongly to what the Americans did in Venezuela, and now you have possibly Greenland and Iran next, then are there consequences? I mean, for not speaking up strongly, is my point.
Sure, there are consequences, and we need to understand in the world order that we are, power can compel, but legitimacy has to be earned. And the US, nobody thinks is a legitimate action. It's a action of a display of power, and power has prevailed there. But I don't think anyone has said, whether India or others, have been supportive that it's a legitimate action. So yes, given the power dynamics today, it looks like the US has got away with it, but it hasn't got legitimacy. And we've seen this happen in country after country, that if the US tries to bring about a change of what we call regime change, uh,
Right.
it's not likely to be successful in that, because you may dispose a leader. But we've seen in country after country that disposing a leader, undermining a regime, cracks open a Pandora's box. Let's look at Libya. Yes, the leader was a dictator. Yes, the leader had many things that you could be opposed to. But what is Libya today? It's fractured, it's divided, it doesn't have a center, it's fragmented. So always, even if the US is thinking of anything beyond the first step, all we could say is be cautious. It's not going to be an easy thing. And the US itself has been saying nation building is not its task. Trump has many a time said, criticized US efforts of nation building in the past. And so I don't think that it can now turn, say, 180 degrees turn and say that I want to do nation building in Iran, because
He calls
we've
himself
seen.
the acting president of Venezuela. So what does one say? I mean, one day it's something else, and another day it's something else. It's really remarkable. But finally, Ambassador, you touched on the fact that there is a new U.S. envoy to India. Finally, about a year into Trump's second term, he made a lot of conciliatory statements on his first day, and this comes after the U.S. Commerce Secretary actually blamed India for the delay in the trade deal, and made statements that didn't go down too well in Delhi. What do you make of this? Do you see this as a genuine turning point where maybe we'll see a thaw, or is there a really long way to go before we can say that?
So, Nidhi, Indo-US ties are in need of a balm. They have we've seen a series of blows um, that have impacted on our ties with the US in the last 6 months, mostly for reasons that nobody can fathom. That said, it's a good thing that the US ambassador has come. It's a good thing that he has access to, he is somebody who has access to President Trump. And it's a good thing that he is making the right noises because it's time that these ties are healed, given the dynamics of our relationship, which is multifaceted in nature, which goes beyond transactional choices. And it's time to look at the bigger picture and see that can they be alleviated in some manner because we've been battered for quite some time now.
Absolutely. And the trade talks have resumed. We still don't have a timeline for a trade deal yet. Let's see where that goes. And just to remind everyone, we still have the highest tariffs anywhere in the world on India. Trump's tariffs are the highest at 50%. And if he goes ahead by imposing another 25% on India because of Iran, that's, 75%. So yes, whatever the new US envoy may say, there is some distance to cover. Ambassador Akbaruddin, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us on DeKoder today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nidhi.
And that's it on the show this week. We'll be back with another episode of Tracking Trump next week. Do join us then.